Hello and welcome to Signal Lantern, your beacon of freedom in the Northeast, and a very, very happy new year. It is now 2026. Well, I'm recording this on New Year's Eve, but besides the point, this upcoming year will be America's birthday. And so, what better way to celebrate than kicking it up to 11 with Core? On this episode today, I'm going to talk about a lot of the stuff we did in this past year. There was quite a lot that we did, as well as setting forth some goals for the new year. And most importantly, talking about how you can be involved. So, starting out, this year, about a year ago, I was flying down to Austin, Texas with my dear friend and co founder Remy. On the plane ride, returning from a training seminar we had both attended, I had this idea. Upcoming in April 19th would have been the exact 250th anniversary of Lexington and Concord. The organization I was working for had planned little mini regional group meetings, well, conventions. So each different region, the West, the South, Appalachian, as it will, were each having their own meeting. However, the Northeast got merged with Appalachian in their one conference within Washington, D.C. And I thought about that and I was a little frustrated because they are a very wealthy organization. It's not that they can't, but that they won't. With that in mind, I decided, you know what, I'll do it myself. And so I planned, executed, and organized this entire event, Keepers of the Revolution. Little did I know that it would become something massive. The idea was very simple. Lexington and Concord is where the revolution started. We are how the revolution continues, and don't you dare let anyone tell you that the Northeast is beyond saving, because we have just begun. To inspire the attendees and the next generation of people to come, that they can take action, that they have agency, and they don't have to watch and sit idly by as everything gets ripped to shreds. That the ideals that the founders fought for and bled over are put into the waste bin of history. We had a few prominent speakers. First of all, we had Katrina Smith. She is a Maine level Republican state level representative. We also had Eric Brakey, the director of the New Hampshire Free State Project. He was great, by the way. I'll get back to that. We had Kayvon Moise and Brian Swinehart. Both of them are comedians, as well as a representative from the Leadership Institute. And all of that came together. It was an event that I fundraised for. I was a thorn in the side to our student government at Westfield State. However, the point stand that I was dressed to the nines. Everything was looking good. We had the people come, and I really had no clue where it would take me. As I said, Eric Brakey, he was kind of the star of the show. He spoke unprompted for like 50 minutes and did a Q&A session. He spoke about Cato Institute, or no, just Cato in general. He spoke about the foundations of liberty, how the founding fathers didn't originate it. They had this unbroken line from Cato to Jefferson, and now we are the heirs of that legacy. And he actually won our Trump impression competition as well, so that was fun. We had about, if you count people who popped in and then left as well, like 40 to 50 people, but concurrent, the most at once was about 20. We hope to expand upon that in next going. Now, obviously, the organization that I've started is called Keepers of the Revolution. So every event in April, I'm not going to call it Keepers of the Revolution. I want to call it Flame Keeper Summit. Makes logical. So referring to that, I'll call it Core Inaugural, because it really was. Matt, who you heard of from in our second episode, was an attendee of that original, we'll say, Core Inaugural Summit. And he reached out to me after the fact and said, hey, I remember you saying that you might want to turn this into its own thing. How can I help? We met up, we decided to go through with it, and the rest is history. 3 crazy mofos trying to take over the world. I have to be very precise with the language here. So We are, as it stands now, a incorporation in the state of Massachusetts. You can look us up in the Secretary of the Commonwealth's website, which is really cool, actually. We did put in, it's like a 890 something to file to become official with the IRS. However, we're still waiting on a few key things before we actually apply to be a 501c4 organization. When that is complete, we will be able to take donations and really kick things into high gear. However, prior to us being an organization officially, prior to us being an incorporation, we actually, or our founders in civic activity as a private citizen, specifically Matt, I'm not going to take credit for this, helped elect, really busted his butt to hold signs for Ashley Dickerman in the town of Weymouth. She's an independent elected to the school board of Weymouth. And then later on, there was a special election in the town of Abington. And we also celebrate in the win of Nicole Emery, who, again, Matthew helped elect as a private citizen. I have to be very precise with the language here because I do not want the IRS crawling up my butt. But the point is that we're not just an idea anymore. And as a founder, I put a lot of weight on my shoulders. We're official. Maybe not a C4, but we're an incorporation. And so that means that this isn't just, 3 volunteers trying to know. This is real. And going into this new year, I'm going to treat it as such. The first step, obviously, is to be more official with the IRS, start taking in donations. As I said in the first episode, we don't just plan to be a flash in the pan movement, we plan to be an institution. And there is something that is very encouraging to me. See, from the start, I was not expecting people to be involved. I was pitching them almost the same way that Ernest Shackleton would be. Ernest Shackleton was the first explorer to try to go down to Antarctica. And in the early 1900s, I don't know if it's 1901 or 1904, but there was a newspaper article, a brief blippet, often attributed to him in the classified section. It says, "Men wanted for hazardous journey. Small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger. Safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in event of success." That is roughly the same idea. Now, this particular newspaper blippet almost certainly is apocryphal. There, despite people searching and really trying to find the origin, it almost never was actually published. But it is put in the mythos of Shackleton and his journey because it speaks to something deeper in the human spirit. It speaks to teleological motivation, having a really strong why. And I know that the climb, and particularly Massachusetts and New England, to turn us into a big organization that has the people who are equipped to endure through tough times, which is to be expected, that is a really uphill battle. When I go out and I tell people that, someone has to try. I don't care how hard it will be. I don't care how high the taxes get, how high the regulations are. I will not leave. I'm going to fight for the place I love. I was expecting a lot of good lucks. But what I've been getting as I've been up here in New England, not at national conventions, not at America Fest, but here, I've been getting, yeah, let's go, let's do it, without hesitation. Now, I will chalk that up to just the moment we find ourselves in. The winds are blowing in the right direction, and I have really good timing. Now, my dear friend Remy, on the other hand, he will insist that it's somehow something inherent about me as a leader, that I have the passion and the inspiration to inspire. I still don't understand where he's coming from, but I'll give it to him. He is entitled to his opinion. Free speech. You have the right to be a you have the right to be a dumbass. Oh gosh, I make myself laugh sometimes. I sometimes find it difficult to put into words exactly what I'm trying to do here, because in some essence, what we've done hasn't been done since the time of Calvin Coolidge. Rome was not built in a day. Rome was not burnt to the ground in a day. I mean, it probably was. History majors, don't come after me. But it can be rebuilt. Our great American Republic does not have to die with us. And that is the strength of an organization by New Englanders for New Englanders. Now, practical steps. What exactly are we going to do this upcoming year? First thing, lots of fundraising. As much as we want to have ideas, we also need money to grease the wheels, to buy signs, to buy merchandise like the shirt I'm wearing. That's a side tangent. If you want a core shirt, that would be a good thing to donate for. We're still working on finding a supplier, but I'm very deliberate. I want someone here in New England, not someone out in California. I think beyond all, what I want is community. I don't want people to believe that they are alone in their viewpoints. I don't want people to feel isolated, like they have no one, they have no family, they have no civic action that they could take, that they're just forced to sit idly by and watch things fall apart. No, because we're not. We all have a decision to make. We all have a choice. Many people have chosen inaction. Many people have chosen the easy path. White picket fence, 2 kids. And you know what? Maybe other people can have that life. But for me, I'm willing to stake everything for the idea that freedom is not dead, nor will it die, not under my watch. I think temperamentally, I don't have a level of militant intensity that you may find in other leaders. At times, I come across as an academic, someone who is, I don't know, book smart, maybe a little pretentious. But the organization I'm building does not need militant intensity for short bursts of time. It needs it sustained over the long haul. It needs 20 years of constant grind. Maybe little by little, but that continued effort, no matter who I bring along, no matter how many other people join, the buck stops with me. I do not undertake this burden with levity or whimsical, just carelessness to the wind. I know what I'm getting myself into. I know that it'll be backbreaking and thankless work. But I also know that no one else is trying. And for the people who are trying, the people who are out there, I applaud you. And I want you to join. The thing about Quora that's beautiful is that it hopes to be a coalition of coalitions. It's not to be a single issue group. So there are plenty of groups out there who may just focus on like abortion, or may just focus on gun rights, or may just focus on like fiscal responsibility. I have 3 in mind as I'm saying that. And they're single issue groups. They just focus on that one thing. But Quora wants to bring those people together, that anyone within the region of New England who is fighting the good fight for liberty, for constitutional values, for morality, and just strong, principled governance, those are the people we're looking for. Does not matter what side of the aisle you are on. It matters that you operate off of first principles. You can have a very crappy Republican and a very constitutional Democrat. It really doesn't matter. I mean, our first candidate is a registered independent. There's something to be said there. The first one that, even prior to us being an organization, us throwing our weight behind, Ashley Dickerman, Weymouth School Board, registered independent. We are not in the business of partisanship. We are in the business of principle. But that's the other thing. It's not just parties, it's people within the parties. That is the truth. We look at the individual person, we support the individual person, we get that person elected. We put duty over everything else. Duty, endurance, excellence, and prudence. And since this is a New Year's episode, and I do not have my co-founder Matt here to stop me, you brought this upon yourself, buddy. I'm going to talk about the other individual framed right above my head here. The first one, obviously, is Charlie Kirk. That is the real Charlie Kirk, not a meme face like J.D. Vance. But who is that guy in black and white in the center? Well, let me tell you about George B. Cortelyou. Private secretary to William McKinley, served underneath Grover Cleveland's second term, William McKinley, and Teddy Roosevelt. He exemplified a life of duty. Let me share a vignette about this. It is the summer of 1901. Teddy Roosevelt is now the vice president. Garrett Hobart had died, and William McKinley is coasting straight into the beginning of the new millennium, 1900s. And he says, I want to go to this Pan American Exposition, and I'm going to shake hands with my supporters publicly, show them my support, and give a speech the day about industry and the booming superpower. You know, they just won the War of 1898. Cortelyou takes one look at the event. Again, he's a bit of a press secretary, chief of staff, and head of security all wrapped up in one. He says, Mr. President, are you insane? There have been anarchist shootings across the world, heads of state dropping like flies in Italy and France, and you want to publicly shake hands with your supporters? I will not have this. Certainly the man did not say this. He was a quiet man. However, he probably thought it very loudly. He took it off McKinley's schedule. McKinley puts it back on. Cortelyou takes it off. This happens 3 times before McKinley finally says, I have no enemies. No one would want to harm me. Well, not wanting to commit blatant insubordination, he does in politics what is called advance work in the modern day. He plans this event start to finish. He sends a flurry of telegrams out to the organizers in Buffalo at the Pan American Exposition, and he sets it up. He says, okay, there's going to be this row of people, security guards watching for shady individuals. The door is going to open exactly at this time. I am going to put my hand up, and when you see this signal, you close the doors. And so it comes to pass. It is September the 6th of 1901. William McKinley is standing there. They open the doors. Cortelyou is extremely anxious. People file in. McKinley is very well liked. He had a warm smile, remembered individuals, shook their hand nicely, and put them off on their way. And so they're looking for shady individuals. It's a hot day, so one person, has a handkerchief dabbing their head for sweat. One person has it wrapped around his hand. Cortelliou's looking at his pocket watch. He's getting ready to put up his hand to give the signal when he hears bam, bam. All of a sudden, the unthinkable happens. William McKinley is falling backwards, just shot twice. This guy who had wrapped the handkerchief was hiding a gun. He gets tackled to the ground. McKinley says, go easy on him, boys. The person who has just shot him, McKinley is like, don't beat the snot out of them. He is subdued. William McKinley reaches up to his secretary and says, Cortelyou, tell my wife. Be careful how you tell her. Now, Ida McKinley was disabled. They had 2 children, but lost them very young in infancy. And so because of that, Ida McKinley was just chronically disabled. And he had wanted to go to Pan American Exposition in the summer, but Ida McKinley had an illness, and so he had to plan the schedule. He basically planned his entire life around his wife. And so what the first thought he has is, don't tell my wife, because she's going to have a heart attack and die too out of the shock. But all of a sudden, the reality sets in. Teddy Roosevelt is up in Vermont giving a speech at some sportsman club. And this private secretary, this humble man who had never sought office, who had never, took an oath, all of a sudden is basically the president of the United States. McKinley goes off to this local house event organizer, and a bunch of people come. He says, "Man, I know none of you." And he has assured Secretary, these are the best surgeons in the city of Buffalo. He says, "Well, go and operate." What? Go ahead and operate right now? Well, yeah, certainly. Is it best not to act quick? So they operate on them. They find one of the bullets. They don't find the other one. Um, it's chaos, or it would have been chaos if not for the steady, stalwart hand of Cortelyou. He did not ask for this. He was like a second son to William and Ida McKinley, and so it's almost like watching your father get shot. But he did what he had to do. Now, things seem to be looking up. McKinley is, talking, how'd they like my speech? He sends telegrams, all right, Secretary Hay, Secretary Root, you guys can go back, false alarm, Teddy, go do your thing. So he decides, as Teddy Roosevelt does, climb up the mountain in the Adirondacks. Everything seems to go right. But then gangrene sets in. It becomes very clear that McKinley is fading and fast. He finally says it's all over. So his wife is brought in. His, people are watching. And his last recorded words were, "It is done. Goodbye, all. God's will, not ours, be done." Which, by the way, what a freaking banger. McKinley, my man. Number 25. But anyways, Cortelyou, until Teddy Roosevelt got there, for all intents and purposes, was the 25th and a half president. And for those of you who are going to say, no, he was like an acting president, I give you this. We would not have a press secretary but for Cortelyou. A lot of the institutional changes in the White House were because of this man who never sought office. If he was just a little bit more ambitious, he very well could have been the 27th president instead of Taft. And yet, he did what he had to do. He went on to be the first Secretary of Commerce and Labor, the head of the RNC to get Teddy Roosevelt elected in 1904, the Postmaster General, the Secretary of the Treasury, and then he quietly bowed out of public life. He took the presidency of Consolidated Edison Gas Company, built it into this massive thing. From 1909 to 1935, 26 years he was the head of this company. He died in his home in 1940, and history swept him under the rug. Why do I tell you about Cortelyou? Well, one, autistic special focus. But more importantly, when I talk about deep, when I talk about duty, endurance, excellence, and prudence, Cortelyou best exemplifies that sense of duty. Above all, above anything else, he did what he was called to do without groaning, without complaining. He lived through the death of a president, and he held the country steady. That's the thing. When you ask people about presidential assassinations, you get Kennedy and you get Lincoln for any bystander. Well, obviously, shot in the back of the head, instant death. Of course, that is going to cause some level of chaos. Now, for the people who have watched Death by Lightning, good show, I recommend it on Netflix, they might also say James Garfield. The other one, William McKinley, seldom gets any light. For James Garfield and William McKinley, they exist in a category that they lasted a little while longer. Garfield lasted about 2 months, McKinley 8 days. But for those 8 days that needed a president, Cortelyou was the man who held the country together. And arguably, if he was not there, we would not have had, people may say McKinley, because that chaos really could have gotten out of hand. And so when I think about how I'm supposed to lead this organization, I know that by necessity, I am going to be the man out front, the man up there. But I also think about the virtue of duty. Cortelyou was a technocrat, not in the pejorative way that we modern conservatives will use and say, oh, those technocrats running the deep state. No. Cortelyou definitionally was a man who had competence more than charisma. He was elevated into a position of power because he was extremely good at what he did. And he was uncompromising on his beliefs. All of this to say is that when times get tough, when the unthinkable happens, no matter how many elections are lost, no matter how much funding is pulled away, no matter when hope has been all but diminished and the flame of liberty fanned out, we are the keepers of that flame. We contain within us the spark of leadership that propels even a lowly secretary to live up to the charge. The road that lies ahead is bumpy, but together we can bear that journey. Going into this new year, I want you to know that you have my undying commitment, pledging to you my life, my fortune, my sacred honor, or fortune. I don't have a fortune. What I do have is resolve. And sure, some of this may sound repetitive, but because it bears true. When all else is lost, what we have is the American spirit of undying, forward-going endurance. These principles will not die with me. This new year, we celebrate the birth of America and the rebirth of liberty in the Northeast. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of Signal Lantern. Do me a favor, spread the signal. The best way to grow is by word of mouth. I don't have any button to donate yet, but share. Get the word out there, because together we can win. And we will. God bless you and Happy New Year.